Around this time last year, everybody and their mammies were excited for the Nintendo Switch, while at the same time remaining skeptical since Nintendo shit the carpet with the Wii U not too long before. And it appeared that consumers rubbing Nintendo's nose in the Wii U's mess disciplined them well, because the Switch is on fire with more good games to play than a prisoner with a life sentence trapped inside a bomb shelter on the moon with a boner could even find the time to play. Never mind not even having the money to actually be able to buy all these games. And due to the fact that I have 400 hours of community service to fulfill after a minor incident at Nintendo HQ where, in self-defense, I got a little carried away and streaked while impersonating an officer while being kicked out for the 34th time, I thought for community service I'd do everybody a huge favor and compile the 11 best Nintendo Switch games of all time. As of December 2017, anyway. But before I begin, I'm also legally obligated to ask you to go right ahead and press that there subscribe button if you're super badass and cool. Anyway, let's begin! Okay, so like I said, there's way too many Switch games coming out at once for any single human being to be able to play them all. And I'm a single son with 3 dads to feed, which means I'm only gonna talk about my 11 favorite games that I've personally had the chance to play. So don't pee in my hair if I don't talk about a game that you like, cause I'll tell you right now, there's plenty of good ones that I plan on getting to at some point. Also, I'm ranking these games based off how good they are, period, and whether or not I've played them before on another console is irrelevant. So I'm gonna proceed as if the Switch is the only console these games exist on, cause some of these re-releases are new to me, so I'm assuming they'll be new to a lot of others as well. And trying to knock remakes down a notch just because they're old would be misleading in the grand scheme of things. Anywho, number 11. Arms and hair. Ever since mankind was first invented by Jack Nicholson, people have been known to get into the occasional scuffle every now and again. But fighting is wrong, and you should only resort to violence to defend yourself or if somebody pisses you off. However, most people have trouble curbing this ape-like behavior, which is why Nintendo made a game where you can actually fight other people. But unlike real life, this fighting game's characters have piccolo arms that stretch to far distances, which is a fun twist to stand out from other games that also happen to be about fighting. Speaking of other fighting games, many would argue that Ultra Street Fighter 2 is currently the best one on the Switch. And while I agree that it probably is, this is a personal list, and I've never really been into fighting games all that much in the first place anyway. I wouldn't say I'm crazy about arms, but there's more involved in the gameplay that makes a fight feel more like a chess match than fighting games where button mashing can get you by. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Street Fighter or other fighting games are button mashers, but if you do button mash in those types of games, you could potentially get lucky and win, whereas that'd be much harder to pull off in arms. At least I'd think so anyway. Either way, if I had to play a fighting game, then this would be one of the top choices for my skinny fat ass, which is why it made the list. Number 10. Axiom Verge. I know this game's old, but I've never heard it before patron Dr. Ross PhD told me about it. So when I saw it on sale at Funko Land, I took a gamble on it and never looked back. It's basically a Metroid clone, which is kinda sad because I still haven't finished Return of Samus, but instead I'm playing a knockoff. And when I say knockoff, I mean it in the most respectful way, because this game's so fun it makes me pee my trousers. The story's gritty and interesting, while still remaining humorous and fun. The graphics have an 8-bit retro style, which is something I've been growing tired of in recent years. However, that being said, Axiom Verge pulls this look off very well, and nails the Metroidvania execution gloriously. If you've never played this before and love Metroid, then quit your job, leave your family, and abandon all your life's responsibilities to play it right now. It's metaphorically that good. Number 9. Puyo Tetris. Some of you might not think of this as a must-own game, since Tetris has been on every electronic device ever, and this particular rendition of it's relatively old. But even though I already said games being ports wouldn't affect my judgment, it wouldn't even matter if it did, because this game's only been released outside of Japan in 2017 at the same time on the Switch as it was for other consoles anyway. There's a lot more to Puyo Tetris than you'd think. I pretty much consider it multiple games in one, as opposed to the Tetris app you have on your phone. Although you can play both while taking a doo-doo, so there is that. On the rare occasion that I actually have friends to play games with, this one's always a go-to, seeing as how it's relatively simplistic. And seeing as how it's relatively simplistic, it's not the kind of multiplayer game that puts anybody at a disadvantage for being stuck with the Joy-Con. In fact, I'd even believe it if somebody told me they prefer this game with a Joy-Con. Puyo Tetris is great for small get-togethers with so many different modes to choose from, so you could always keep things fresh. Just don't play it online unless you're really good. Otherwise, you'll puke your pants like I did. Number 8. Splatoon 2. Although this game really isn't that much different from the first Splatoon, I still think it's different enough to be considered a sequel, considering what a lot of other sequels are allowed to get away with these days. Even though it's pretty much just Splatoon Deluxe, it's still one of the best games on the Nintendo Switch. In case you're unaware, Splatoon's a Nintendo shooter where you use ink instead of bullets, and while it is encouraged to kill opponents with your weapons, the ultimate goal is to cover as much of the map in your team's color of ink as possible, as well as other additional game modes as well. The single-player campaign's pretty decent, but the meat and potatoes are in playing the game online. Despite Nintendo currently being behind the times with online gaming, Splatoon 2 is still a game that can keep you busy for a long time, and you'll get way more than your money's worth out of it.
Hey, I was never too cool for school. In fact, when I was a kid, I was actually too stupid. And sexy. At least that's why my teacher said he molested me.
But Cameron, you were homeschooled.
Ah!
Number 7. Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle. I've never given a monkey's nutsack about any of the Rabbids games, and when I heard about this I had very low expectations and got it more out of curiosity than anything else. But over 30 hours later, I'd say this game's proven me wrong. The battles are very simplistic, but a heck of a mess of fun, and there's plenty of challenging post-game content to keep you busy if you need some extra sauce in your milk. Since I'll probably never talk about this game again, I've gotta mention how much it irks the shit out of me when the audio glitches after every battle you win. Why couldn't they have just worked a little harder to fix this? It doesn't actually make the game worse, but since I didn't make a video on it, I had to get that off my ass since I still randomly think about it when I'm driving. So I guess that technically counts as being a traumatic experience. Which just goes to show that despite giving me PTSD, it still managed to be my 7th favorite Switch game in the history of the universe, so far in 2017. Number 6. Sonic Mania. A lot of people say this game's overrated, and I'm sure to get some idle threats in the comments over it being relatively high on my list. But just remember that this is my personal list, and while nostalgia for Sonic's playing a factor in my judgment here, this game still has a lot more going for itself, like a cheap price, plenty of variety, and no bullshit that's in other Sonic games like running into things you didn't have time to prepare for. I like more Sonic games than the average person, but think his 2D adventures were best on the Genesis. And I know I said before I think relying on retro graphics is being overdone lately, but Sonic returning to the 16-bit style Genesis graphics actually tickles people's nostalgia holes. And the main reason I prefer the blue blur in the Genesis isn't even because of nostalgia anyway. It's because the controls back then were way tighter, albeit the games were a little slower. But they were fast enough for me, damn it. And besides, I wouldn't even call this game 16 bits, since it definitely couldn't run on a Genesis. It's what I'd like to believe a 2D Sonic game would have looked like on the Sega Saturn, minus the HD. In addition to the classic gameplay, the Blue Sphere's minigame's better than ever, with like 80 different stages. In fact, I think that'd make a pretty good spin-off game on its own for like $1. Plus, the UFO stages are pretty cool too, and you could even play Puyo Puyo, not to mention that all this is only $20. If only it had a physical copy. I'm sure Sega will release one eventually to get people to buy it again, which seems to be the trend nowadays. Oh well, my dumbass will probably buy it again. But even for $50, this game would be a must-have for me since it's my favorite Sonic game ever made. Number 5. Doom. I've never played this on other consoles, and I had no idea what to expect since I'm not really into first-person shooters. I got this game to support third parties on the Switch more than anything else, and due to my good friend Shane's recommendation, I thought this would be a safe bet. And boy was it ever. This is a game I just couldn't put down. I couldn't even put this down long enough to drop my dad off at soccer practice, which resulted in me wrecking my car and fracturing my femur. Rest in peace, Pet Pet. We hardly knew ye. The thing is though, when the police were filing their report, I thought for sure I was going to federal prison. But Officer Morales let me off the hook as soon as I mentioned the reason I crashed was because I was playing Doom. And I'm sure everybody who's watching that's played it would understand why. This game doesn't try to pretend to be anything it's not. It's a fast-paced action-packed shooter where you're on Mars and have to go to hell to seal it off, destroying various butthole demons in the process. And the game keeps throwing monkey wrenches at you during combat till the very end, keeping it from ever getting stale. If you haven't played this game yet, I highly recommend it, even if you're not really into first-person shooters. There's an online mode that I probably won't even play for some added value, but even with just the single-player campaign that's loaded with all the DLC and extras from the previous games, and the fact that you can take it with you on the go, makes Doom for the Nintendo Switch well worth your money, and looks great despite the graphical downgrade. If you're gonna play it and drive though, just be careful, because while I have zero regrets, it'd probably have been better had I not lost one of my dads. But to be fair, the reason I wrecked wasn't even because I was playing Doom. It's because my dad was actually distracting me from the road trying to get me to stop. So my conscience is clear. Number 4. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. First of all, why couldn't they call this Mario Kart 8 DX like they used to with the deluxe versions of Game Boy Color games? Even though this is yet another game from the Wii U, it was still one of the best games on that console, and with all the DLC and extras included on top of it, this version's even better. In fact, it's the best in the entire series, with the controls being the best they've ever been, blue shells not being as common as they were in Mario Kart 7 and under, plus the plethora of tracks, characters, and vehicles, specifically from other franchises, and for some reason BMW. Because, you know, seeing a car in a Nintendo game's enough to convince somebody to drop well over $100 on a new whip. After all, the advertisement was enough to get me to buy a BMW after my dumbass dad got me killed in Doom while I was driving. As far as online gaming with the Switch goes, though, Mario Kart 8's still the cream of the crop, even with Nintendo still ironing some kinks out in that department. If you own a Switch, there's no excuse not to pick this up at some point, especially if you haven't played the original on the Wii U. And you and I both know you've never owned a Wii U, because nobody did. It wasn't even real. So what are you jabronis waiting for? Go get it. Number 3. Xenoblade 2. I decided to make a top 11 Nintendo Switch games video shortly after Doom came out, but I thought it'd be unfair to exclude Xenoblade 2. I never thought I'd like the idea of action RPGs because they were always confusing to me. I played the last story all the way through and understood the combat, but it just felt like a chore to complete. But then I played Xenoblade right after and I gave up once I started getting confused because the last story left a bad taste in my mouth for the genre, I guess. Not that the last story was that bad, it was just whatever. Before I played Xenoblade 2 though, I was fully prepared for people to shove their fists up my arse for not including it here. Because I didn't want to lie and include it here just so I could fit in with the rest of the YouTube gaming community, but I did have to give the game an honest chance before leaving it out entirely. And I'm glad glad that I did, because I can honestly say that this game greatly exceeded my expectations, and I've been itching to play it whenever I'm not able to. Even as I'm working on this video, I just keep thinking about how I want to get back to it. Admittedly, I'm not terribly far into the game yet, but so far everything's been explained well, and this game's sprinkling more and more layers onto the combat as time goes on, rather than dumping everything onto you all at once. And I can totally see how everything I'm saying right now could be upsetting veterans of the series, and if you still want to punch my butt, then have at you. But for somebody like me, Xenoblade 2 hit it out of the park. And the best part is that by the time I finish playing it, I'm sure I'll understand the mechanics enough to want to go back and play the other games. I'm sure it's not exactly the same, but the concept won't be foreign to me at least. Although, since I haven't finished Xenoblade 2 yet, you could argue that I might end up liking it more and should wait a little longer before making this video. And while there is a chance that might end up being the case, I'm willing to gamble that I won't like it more than the next two games, which I'm sure you all knew what they'd be before even clicking the video. So let's finish things off with number 2, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and number 1, Super Mario Odyssey. You might have already known that Mario Odyssey would top this list since I already made a video pitting these two games against each other, with Mario Odyssey being declared the victor, despite not being named victor at all. So I'm not going to go too deep into detail here, but I will address the number one criticism I've gotten with preferring Mario Odyssey over Breath of the Wild, and that Bots was more groundbreaking for the series and therefore is a better game. First off, I love Breath of the Wild. I spent over 145 hours playing it and loved every minute of it. Plus, it's my number 2 favorite Switch game of all time after all. As of 2017, of course. And if you think Breath of the Wild's the better game, then you're not wrong since it's so different from Mario Odyssey that it really just comes down to personal preference or whatever you're in the mood for. But while Mario Odyssey does try new things, I would agree that it isn't as fresh or groundbreaking for its series as Breath of the Wild is for Zelda. However, I just think Mario Odyssey's flat out more fun and has fewer flaws to nitpick if I'm trying to be a dick. Sure, collecting some of the moons are easier than scoring with my grandma, and also like my grandma, it's pretty lame that you could just buy moons to progress further in the game if you don't feel like trying. But even so, I still prefer those nitpicks over waiting around like an asshole till the rain stops so you can continue exploring, since there isn't a suit that allows climbing on wet surfaces for some reason. I know you can pass the time by starting campfires, but sometimes the rain stops by the time you can even find cover. If you want me to go into more detail as to why I prefer Mario Odyssey over Breath of the Wild, I'll leave a link in the description and end slate. Just remember that I do love both games. But that's my list, and it was a lot harder to make than I thought it'd be. Or it'd be more accurate to say that it's hard for different reasons than I initially thought. 11 sounded like a lot of games to come up with for a console that hasn't even been out for a year. And even though some of them have already been on other consoles, it didn't take very long to get overwhelmed as to what would actually make the cut since I haven't even played everything yet. And even some of the games that I did play and enjoy had to sit outside like Binding of Isaac and Perception. But that just goes to show how many good games the Switch actually has, with plenty more surely to come in 2018. Anyway, what games would make your list? What haven't I mentioned that I should get around to playing first? Do you want to cause me physical harm over any of my choices? As always, let me know in the comments below and I'll pin whatever I find most entertaining. Don't forget to like and share this video if you want to help this channel grow, and if you're a legendary human being, then why not subscribe as well? My name's Cameron, and I'll see you next time.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.